Thank you. Say a special thank you to the witnesses for being here. Many of you, I think all of you, traveled in order to be here today. Thanks to everybody for accommodating our change in time. The Senate floor is going to be tied up here later today, and thus no committee business is happening. So thanks all of you for being here and for accommodating us. I'm going to make just a few opening remarks. Senator Durbin will do the same, then we'll swear in the witnesses and be off to the races. Let me just start by saying that today's hearing is about the largest intellectual property theft in American history. For all of the talk about artificial intelligence and innovation and the future that comes out of Silicon Valley, here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. AI companies are training their models on stolen material, period. That is just the fact of the matter. And we're not talking about these companies simply scouring the internet for what's publicly available. We're talking about piracy. We're talking about theft. For years, AI companies have stolen massive amounts of copyrighted material from illegal online repositories. Now, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security regularly prosecute individuals who engage in exactly the same kind of behavior using platforms like LimeWire or Napster in the old days, using a process called torrenting. But have these big tech companies been prosecuted? No, of course not. They're getting off scot-free, and this hearing will show us that Meta and Anthropic and other AI companies are willfully using these illegal networks, these torrenting networks as they're called, to steal vast swaths of copyrighted materials. The amount of material that we're talking about is absolutely mind-boggling. We're talking about every book and every academic article ever written. Let me say that again. Every book and every article ever written. Billions of pages of copyrighted works, enough to fill 22 libraries the size of the Library of Congress. Think about that. 22 libraries of Congresses full of works. That is how much has been stolen, and this theft was not some innocent mistake. They knew exactly what they were doing. They pirated these materials willfully. As the idea of pirating copyrighted works percolated through Meta, to take one example, employee after employee warned management that what they were doing was illegal. One Meta employee told management that, and I quote now, "This is not trivial," and he shared an article asking, what is the probability of getting arrested for using torrents, illegal downloads, in the United States? Another Meta employee shared a different article saying that downloading from illegal repositories would open Meta up to legal ramifications. That's a nice way of saying that what they were doing was exactly, totally, 100% barred by copyright law. Did Meta management listen? No. They bulldozed straight ahead. We'll see evidence today that Mark Zuckerberg himself approved the decision to use these pirated materials. And then, the best part, Meta management tried to hide it. They tried to hide the fact that they were engaged in the illegal download of pirated works. And not just the illegal download, but the illegal distribution of these same works. They tried to hide it by using non-company servers. They went so far as to train their AI model. Get this. Meta trained its AI model to lie to users about what data it had been trained on. I mean, you talk about an Inception-level worthy deception. Training the AI model to lie about what its own sources were. This isn't just aggressive business tactics. This is criminal conduct. And I just want to point out, Meta's conduct is not an exception. This is the rule when it comes to what is happening right now in the AI space among these mega companies. Big tech operates on the model of do whatever you want and count on the lobbyists and the lawyers to fix it later. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about America. They don't care about freedom. They certainly don't care about working people. They care about power, and they care about money. And every time they say things like, we can't let China beat us, let me just translate that for you. Every time they say that, we can't let China beat us, what they're really saying is, give us truckloads of cash and let us steal everything from you and make billions of dollars on it. That's the translation. And we're going to see that in the testimony and the evidence today. Here's the bottom line. We have got to do something to protect the people of this country. I'm all for innovation, but not at the price of illegality. I'm all for innovation, but not at the price of destroying the intellectual property of the average man and woman in this country. We have laws for a reason. Those laws ought to be enforced, and big tech should not be above the law. Enough is enough. It's time to enforce the law. And that's what this hearing today is about. Now I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Durbin. Thank you very much to the ranking member. It's the practice of the Judiciary Committee and all of its subcommittees to swear in witnesses before they testify. So could I ask you to stand up, raise your right hand, and repeat after me? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Very good. We'll now proceed to opening statements. We'll give 5 minutes to each witness. I'll just say a brief word of introduction before each witness. We'll just go straight down the table here, down the dais. We'll start with Mr. Max Pritt. Mr. Pritt is a partner at Boies Schiller, and he represents authors in a civil copyright infringement suit against Meta, among other matters. Mr. Pritt, the floor is yours.
Chairman Hawley, Ranking Member Durbin, thank you for the invitation and opportunity to testify today. The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, Theodore Roosevelt, Preacher of Righteousness by Josh Hawley. These are just a handful of the many, many millions of copyrighted books and publications that some of the world's largest and wealthiest corporations, Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, knowingly and intentionally pirated from illicit online marketplaces for financial gain and to seek a competitive advantage in AI. Today, this committee begins to investigate and shine a light on what is likely the largest infringement of American intellectual property by US companies in our nation's history. As tech companies scrambled to release generative AI models and to catch up with OpenAI's ChatGPT, many of them turned to illicit online repositories to take tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of books and scholarly publications and articles for free instead of buying them or licensing them from copyright owners. By pirating these works, AI companies have built a multi-billion-dollar industry that is projected to be a trillion-dollar industry in the next few years without paying a single cent to the authors whose works power their products or the publishers responsible for introducing those works to the public here and abroad. Take Meta, for example. From the early days of its generative AI program, Meta concluded that training its models using books and articles would help their performance. But instead of buying or licensing these works from copyright owners, Meta decided to take them from notorious online marketplaces of stolen copyrighted works, including some of the same ones targeted by the Department of Justice and the FBI for criminal copyright infringement. And Meta didn't just download books from these illegal repositories. It used the same kind of peer-to-peer file sharing networks that powered Napster. In other words, Meta also made copies and sent them to other pirates. In total, Meta pirated well over 200 terabytes of pirated books and articles, a size comparable to the entire printed collection of the Library of Congress 20 times over, or the equivalent of a stack of many billions of pages of text. Meta's piracy included many millions of works, including at least 12 books authored by members of this very subcommittee and every US president and vice president in the 21st century. Meta also made and sent copies of over 40 terabytes of pirated works to others. In doing so, Meta has helped to revive online piracy by propping up the foreign criminal syndicates that run these illicit marketplaces to violate US copyrights around the globe. As Anna's Archive, the largest illicit online marketplace of stolen literature in the world today, says on its own website, shadow libraries were dying, then came AI. Meta is not alone, and it was not the first US company to engage in rampant domestic piracy for its own commercial purposes. Pending lawsuits against OpenAI and Anthropic revealed that both companies also pirated millions of copyrighted works. And the decisions to engage in this mass domestic piracy were made at the highest levels. Company documents that are now public show, for example, that the decision to pirate instead of license was approved by Meta's co-founder and CEO, Mark Zuckerberg himself. This decision to engage in mass piracy was made even though key employees knew that doing so was both illegal and unethical. One Meta researcher argued that using pirated material should be beyond our ethical threshold. Another called Meta an accomplice to piracy. Yet another warned that if the media got wind of the company's use of pirated data, It could undermine Meta's negotiating position with regulators, the very people in this room and across the hall, in the White House, and in state houses across the country. And when asked if he cared whether Meta protects human creativity rather than exploits it, Meta's head of AI partnerships testified he does not care. AI companies now seek a pass for this unprecedented piracy by invoking a limited exception to copyright infringement called fair use, which Congress codified in the Copyright Act of 1976. They also argue they can't compete with China if they can't infringe every American's copyright. Nonsense. Our tech companies employ the best and brightest minds in the world, and they are the wealthiest corporations in the world. It is not credible for these companies to argue they can invest hundreds of billions of dollars into hiring talent and building data centers to power their commercial AI products and models, but they can't pay a single cent to copyright owners. There is no carve-out in the Copyright Act for AI companies to engage in mass digital piracy. I'm grateful to Chairman Hawley, Ranking Member Durbin, and this subcommittee for your attention to the issue. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Next up is Professor Mike Smith. Professor Smith is Professor of Information Technology and Marketing at Carnegie Mellon University. He's written extensively on piracy and its effects on innovation. Professor Smith.
Chairman Hawley, Ranking Member Durbin, I am very honored and thankful for the opportunity to testify today on this important issue. My testimony today is informed by 25 years of empirical research into the impact of new technologies on the markets, on the creative markets, and my experience serving on a roundtable of 10 economists convened by the U.S. Copyright Office to study the implications of generative AI on copyright policy. My research into piracy started in the early 2000s when digital piracy was a relatively new problem for the creative industries. During that period, many in the tech community argued that piracy was fair use because it would not harm legal sales, was unlikely to harm creativity, and any legislative efforts to curtail piracy would not only be ineffective, but would also stifle innovation. My empirical research over the past 25 years has studied these questions. In 2020, my colleagues and I surveyed over 40 papers published in peer-reviewed academic journals as part of a piracy landscape study we wrote for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Our report drew three broad conclusions. First, the peer-reviewed academic literature shows that digital piracy does harm creators by reducing their ability to make money from their creative efforts. Second, the peer-reviewed academic literature shows that digital piracy does harm society by reducing the economic incentives for investment in creative output. Third, the peer-reviewed academic literature shows that copyright enforcement has been effective in reversing these harms, while also allowing businesses and legal online distribution platforms to thrive and innovate. Today, we're hearing many of the same arguments we heard in the early days of the internet. Allowing generative AI companies to use pirated content to train their models is fair use because it won't harm legal sales, won't harm creativity, and any enforcement efforts to curtail the use of pirated material for training will not only be ineffective, but will also stifle innovation. My response to those arguments is that while the time has changed, the underlying economic principles are the same today as they were in 2000. And by applying those principles, I think we can draw many of the same conclusions. First, the use of pirated content to train generative AI models will harm sales for creators. Allowing generative AI companies to train their models with pirated content is likely to harm markets for creators by damaging the original markets for their work, by damaging licensing markets for those works, and by creating perverse incentives for bad actors to add new copyrighted content to pirate networks, in essence, allowing generative AI companies to launder licensable content through piracy. Second, the use of pirated content to train generative AI models will harm society by reducing economic incentives for creators. This conclusion is similar to the early piracy research. Economic incentives drive creative output. But there's a new and unique indignity to our current situation. When piracy is used to train generative AI models, we're not only stealing from creators, we're then using the theft of their content to create tools that can flood the market with machine-generated output, which in turn will replace many of those creators, particularly emerging artists. And third, as in the early days of piracy, I believe that enforcing copyright law in the context of generative AI training can be effective at reversing these harms, and can create a world where both the creative industries and the technology industries are able to thrive. If the Napster and Grokster decisions had gone the other way in the early 2000s, it's hard to imagine that Spotify and Netflix would exist today, and that would be to the detriment of consumers, the creative community, and the technology community. I think today we have a similar opportunity to create a win-win-win for society, creators, and tech firms by making it clear that piracy is wrong and that a vibrant technology economy depends on a vibrant creative economy. We found a way to make licensed streaming and sales channels work for consumers, copyright owners, and platforms in the early 2000s. We must do the same for generative AI today. Generative AI has the potential to benefit industry and society in many ways, but achieving that potential will require a more robust and transparent partnership between technology firms and the creative industries. On our current path, we risk killing the goose